Good afternoon, everyone. So my my lightning talk is about the R challenge in spatial analysis. So I will actually repeat some of the examples I briefly mentioned earlier. So more from the student learning perspective. For example, a lot of students will start doing their density. This is a fundamental spatial analysis, and for example, if they're using ArcMap specifically, actually the underlying kernel density will be the Gaussian. But if actually there is no documentation about. Oh, sorry. There is okay. Sorry. There is no specific documentation before that. Actually, there is one forum discussing about this, and if the student took another package, if the developer by default they choose another kernel, so even using the same parameter or the same data sets, they might get different result, and also because those different parameter settings like search readers, cell size, bandwidth, scaling factor, a lot of other things. So the key point here is that how could we incorporate a way to also publish these parameters, maybe using metadata or other maybe province-based model we mentioned this morning. Another example is about the geospatial data communication in terms of representation. So when they get a result, they want to present to the audience. So they want to choose their geo-visualization method. But this is also, I think every introduction to GIS class will mention this data classification schema and how does that influence in the result, right? If we choose different data classification methods, and then you might get different result and a different interpretation. So this is why if we want to make those results reproducible, I think that also we need to incorporate their process in every single step, from their modeling to their analysis and to their visualization as well. So it's a tracking system in every single step in the geoanalytic flow. Similarly, for the GWR and some of the paper results, they actually didn't mention, for example, choosing either the flexible weighting schema or the fixed or adaptive. If it is adaptive, that's fine, but if it's fixed, they either mention distance, or for the adaptive, you also need to set the minimum number of observations to find those local spatial dependency patterns. So I feel that this kind of thing, similarly, we should find a way to track it. So I think that's important. So this is why, for me, I call for open standard. This is for one reason. For example, recently I'm developing a geospatial big data class in my university, and the one issue we found out is that so for those of you who are working on the big data, most of the data format you want to find is JSON objects, and then for example for geospatial world we have ArcGIS-GeoJSON. Actually, S3 also support OpenGeoJSON as well in ArcGIS Online. But we found out there is one tool for example, in the desktop specifically. If we pull the GeoJSON open standard format into a tool, it won't work. Cannot convert into the shapefile, for example, the geospatial features. So which means that even within one proprietary software, actually they exist multiple standards. So this reminds me, it's not saying that which is better. Just I'm thinking that how could we, as a community, to make our standard more openly accessible across academia, industry, and the private public sectors, because actually the GeoJSON was developing by this working group, Internet Engineering Task Force. So it's actually, I don't know any of our community members in that group, but I feel that, for example, this is our core domain. So we here as a group similarly maybe can propose some open standard for the reproducibility and the reproducibility exercise. So last thing is whether we can maybe form some of the existing models, like province-based models for facilitating the RR research. For example, the inclusion of those parameter settings in the provenance information, specifically for library like the metadata was output XML or JSON file, so in which that spatial analysis result and maps are generated. And there is existing provenance ontology from the Web community. So actually they have specifications about how could we actually incorporate the ontologies to encode those different classes, properties, reaction. So I feel that in terms of how can we incorporate open standards into the geoanalytics flow, so this might be one way to incorporate the open standard provenance ontology into the geoanalytic flow. So this is something that interesting to me. So that's all. Thank you.